A very good morning, students. So, we meet again after a long time, and today we are going to do a poem by William Wordsworth, Daffodils. It's a beautiful poem, and I'm sure all of you are going to have a wonderful time. And it is a poem which has stayed with me from my childhood, and I'm sure it is going to do the same to you. The effect is going to remain with you for a long, long time. So let us embark on this beautiful journey of the daffodils. So, yes, The Daffodils is by William Wordsworth, and you can see his picture of the poet down there. And I have also given you the bright yellow daffodils there, right in front of you. And so that you understand what the poet was so fascinated about. Okay, so a brief introduction about the poet is there in your book. So I'm not going to give you the same information again over here in this video. So I've collected some fun facts, some interesting facts from William Wordsworth's life. And I shall not go through this, I shall not read through it. You can take a screenshot and you can go through these when you want to. See, basically, what I want to tell you is that he is a romantic poet. And okay, it's nothing to do with romance as such as you think of romance. It is the romantic period was a period in English literature where people wrote about nature, the romance with nature. Yes. Okay. So he was a poet who was born in England, and all his information, you can go through them and you can have fun. Okay. So I have one more page of introduction. Let us see what that has. Okay. So Wordsworth has his own share of grief and joy, and you can see I've listed certain points about his life. And you can see he was a nature lover. If you read this page, you will see that he was a nature lover. He loved to go on long walks, and people even thought that he was a spy. And in those days, there was he has seen the French Revolution and the English Revolution. So therefore, in those times, they thought that he might be a spy for the French government because of his odd habits. But poets are like that, isn't it? They are a little crazy. And I have to mention another poet, Coleridge, Samuel Coleridge, and they were very good friends. So if I have to talk about Wordsworth, it will be incomplete if I do not mention Coleridge, another English poet, a contemporary. A contemporary poet means a poet who was at the same time as who lived at the same time and who wrote poetry at the same time as Wordsworth. They were good friends, and together they published a book of poetry, and Wordsworth's career was also launched. So they had a lot of conversations together, and they wrote poems together, and they wrote about the same poems. They both belonged to the same romantic movement. Yes. So Wordsworth loved the natural world, and so did Coleridge, and they had a lot of things to share. And it there was a lot of social significance during that time. See, these romantic poems, they also influence the people and their thinking during that time. See, just because before the romantic poets had come, it was the the it was the time of scientific inventions and discoveries. So people were too much into scientific things and all those machines, and people started even writing. They went gaga over these kind of machines and scientific inventions and discoveries, that they started writing poems on them, on machines. So these romantic poets, they said, enough is enough. Let us bring back the beauty of nature and the magic of nature back to poetry. And that's how it should be, isn't it? A poetry is beautiful because it nature makes the poetry even more interesting. So they brought about subjects like, flowers, even strangers, beggars, night, lakes, all kinds of beautiful things of poetry. They brought those elements back to poetry. So And it was said that Wordsworth is credited for inspiring the idea of national parks movement. That's a great feat, I'm sure. It's a social significance. So poets have a great influence on the society. We can see, isn't it? And I'm sure you must have understood that too. Okay, let's move on to the poem now. So let me read the poem for you. I wandered lonely as a cloud that floats on high o'er vales and hills, when all at once I saw a crowd, a host of golden daffodils, beside the lake beneath the trees, fluttering and dancing in the breeze. Okay, so this is the first stanza that we are introduced to, and we can see the poet wandering lonely as a cloud. Now there is a difference. This is wandered, not wondered. Okay, wondering is to think, that is W-O, and wandering is just moving aimlessly, roaming around aimlessly is wandering. Remember his odd habits, walking all the time? He was a poet who loved to walk, and he was wandering. It was one of those days in which he had started to just walk out in the countryside. I wandered lonely as a cloud that floats on high o'er vales and hills. Now, if you see that there is a comparison. Have you understood the comparison? And I've listed a few figures of speech for you here. What are those? Can you pick one which is being described here in the first line of the stanza? Yes, it is the simile. Lonely as a cloud. So, what is being compared to what? The poet is compared to the cloud. Yes, and why? Because the cloud is also lonely. It keeps moving around aimlessly in the sky, and the poet is also doing the same. He is wandering around as a cloud, and that floats on high over vales and hills. So it also moves over vales and hills. Vales means valleys. Okay, I've got a picture of the valley and the hills. Fine. When all at once I saw a crowd, a host of golden daffodils. Can you see on top, just under the name of the poem, Daffodils, I've given you a picture of a field of daffodils. That's the sight that he witnessed. Okay, a host of golden daffodils. Now, why is it a host? Because he is the visitor and they are the host. Okay, and he saw a crowd, a host of golden daffodils beside the lake, beneath the trees. So there were trees and lakes around it. So I've got another picture down there to show you how the daffodils looked beside the lake. So there was a lake also beside there, and it was beneath the trees. So there were lots of trees around, and but daffodils, how did he describe them? They were fluttering and dancing in the breeze. Oh, I did not know that flowers could dance. Could they dance? Of course, we've seen them dancing in the air. There's a gentle wind blowing and over the valley, and you can see these daffodils dancing. So the most important figure of speech in this poem is definitely the first one that I've mentioned, that is imagery. What is imagery? I've given you a handout, remember, in the beginning of all the figures of speech. You can go back to that and check. I'll explain it here definitely. It is imagery are pictures. When the poet is drawing a picture in the mind's eye through mere words. Okay, and you can immediately see the picturesque beauty of nature in front of your eyes. The way the poet has described it, you can immediately understand, you can relate to what he could have, you can relive the joy that he must have witnessed. Fine. Note the words that I speak. So imagery, simile. Now personification. Where is the personification? Dancing and fluttering in the breeze. Can the flowers dance? No, but it is given a human quality. Like people can dance, the flowers also seem to be dancing. That's a human quality. So the flowers have been personified. Daffodils have been personified. Clear? You get it? Now we move on to alliteration, the last one. Though it is very remote, but still I would say it's an alliteration. Beside the lake, beneath the trees. BB. the repetition of the b sound in the um, yes, beside the lake, beneath the trees, in that line. Have you noted it down? So you will underline only the B of these two words. So imagery, simile, personification, alliteration, and whole lot of joy in this poem, isn't it? It has set the mood for the poem, and you feel like going on and seeing what's there, what's next. Okay, we are definitely going to move ahead. Let's see what the poet says in the next stanza. Okay, as we continue, we see the first word is continuous. Continuous as the stars that shine and twinkle on the Milky Way. They stretched in never ending line along the margin of a bay. 10,000 saw I at a glance, tossing their heads in sprightly dance. So we shall do only up to this. So let us try to understand. The first figure of speech is again this simile. Very good. Continuous as the stars that shine. So what is being compared to what? See, in the previous stanza, the poet was comparing himself to a cloud. Now the poet is comparing the daffodils to stars. Why? Because they are also shining. Yes, they are sparkling, they're shining, they're twinkling, and they seem to be full of joy, a bundle of joy. And also, they are continuous. Because they are continuous, they seem to be a whole field of daffodils, and they are all in a particular line. So it is a plantation of daffodils. If you see below, I have given you the picture of a star, of the Milky Way, and of the daffodils in stretched in a never ending line. Okay, and so along the margin of a bay, the bay of the lake. Here it's not the sea, it is the bay of the lake. So there is a lake beside it and the daffodils plantations. So when he was walking over the valley, he suddenly witnessed, when he turned, he must have turned around and he must have seen a huge plantation of daffodils. And they looked, immediately he got a connection and he started comparing them to stars in the sky. And why is he talking about Milky Way? Because there are innumerable stars in the Milky Way. So he is also trying to say that these daffodils also seem to be never ending, like the Milky Way. Can you count the number of stars in the galaxy, in the Milky Way? No, you can't. You can't even count the number of stars in the sky that you beheld at one time in the night. You cannot. So and he says, 10,000 saw I at a glance. Now, is 10,000 a real number? No, it's not a real number. Like, for example, your mother says, I've told you 100 times. Has she actually told you 100 times? It's an exaggeration. Okay, it's an exaggeration. It's a hyperbole. That's another figure of speech. 10,000 soya. Probably there was, but he is just picking up at a random number to just show that how enormous the field was. For us to understand that it was a huge field of daffodils. And when he saw that beautiful sight, he was overwhelmed with joy. And he saw them. Not only that, that's not the end of it. He saw the daffodils, but he also saw them dancing, tossing their heads in sprightly dance. So here there's another case of personification. In the previous one, we had seen that the daffodils were dancing. Here, they were tossing their heads. So they had a head also, like human beings have a head. And when you're dancing, you wave your head in joy. So the daffodils were also joyful, as though the daffodils were very happy to meet the poet, and they were dancing at his visit. Okay, so we have imagery, we have simile, we have personification, and we also have hyperbole. Fine. And those who have done the poetry workshop, I'm sure you must have noticed a few more figures of speech. Yes? Okay. So we will stop here. But I have one last information to give you before we close for the day today. Okay. Let's see. We will do the remaining two stanzas of the poem in the next video. Like I told you, we say stanzas, we don't say paragraphs. for poetry. Yes, so there are three parts or ideas in the poem which I want to discuss. It's also mentioned in your book, but I thought we should first talk about this. See, we have done the first two stanzas. In the first stanza, what was the poet talking about? He was talking about himself. The first stanza is about the poet himself. The second stanza, he gradually moves on to nature. Yes, in the second part, that is the second stanza, he starts. In fact, in the first stanza itself, there is a transition from the poet himself to nature. The second part is he is talking about nature, he's overwhelmed with nature, and he talks about the beautiful sights that he has witnessed when he is in the vicinity of nature. Now we are going to do the third part in the next video, that is the relationship of the poet with nature. That will be the last two stanzas. Okay, there will be a continuation, a little more about nature, and then gradually there will be a relationship of the poet as well as the nature. If you have understood this, then we are done for the day, and so you must go back to the poem, read the poem again so that you understand it better. And we're going to meet in the online class and you can clarify all your doubts there. Okay? So, goodbye till then. Take care, stay safe, and see you.